I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. At a House Budget Committee hearing last week, Representative Bob Good questioned CBO Director Philip Swagel on the economy. The Virginia Republican hammered Democrats over the economy, calling President Biden's plan, quote, build back bankrupt. Take a listen to their exchange here.
Time has expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Good, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony, Director Swagel. Thanks for your appearance today. I find it interesting, if not surprising, that not many of our members in the majority want to participate today and defend the disastrous economic record of this administration, let alone its proposed budget, which would obviously exacerbate the problems we have. It's interesting. The only calls for bipartisanship I've heard from Democrats in my first term is during this hearing, because they don't want to hear from Republicans on the disaster that they've created economically. Director Swagel, if Democrats were trying to ruin the economy, if they were trying to do that, what would they have done differently on spending, on energy, paying people not to work, growing the welfare state, firing people for not getting vaccines, closing or making it hard for businesses to operate, suspending rent and student loan payments, and continuing other COVID mandates and so forth? What might you do differently if you were trying to ruin the economy over the past year and a half?
In our baseline, you can see the effect of the supply challenges that are facing the economy, and with the labor force participation, people not coming back. In part that's because of the health reasons, and so anything that would get people to come back into the labor force that would support greater supply and a stronger economy with lower inflation.
Yeah, I just can't imagine you would do anything differently if you're trying to ruin the economy than what they've done this past year and a half. Do you think that Americans can afford the president's continued pursuit of his Build Back Bankrupt plan? Or maybe said differently, how much worse off would we be if they were successful in passing the unprecedented $5 trillion worth of spending last fall?
Of course, CBO won't evaluate the merits or demerits of policy. We won't tell members what to do. The deficit reduction we've seen this year is under current law. And so if there's additional spending, that would go in the other direction of deficit reduction. And that could have implications for inflation as well. That, I think it's been widely understood that, the lower deficit means some fiscal constraint, and that is reducing inflation along with the actions of the Fed. And so additional spending would go in the other direction. And of course, the details would matter, but broadly speaking, that would have an effect on inflation as well.
Thanks for bringing up the devs. I know others have talked about that already today, but the administration's claiming a deficit reduction, as you know, of $1 trillion or so. But as you know, they're not going to stop with the spending. The Democrat majority here is not going to stop with the spending. There are going to be more they're going to try to get through, to try to get more of the Build Back Bankrupt plan through piecemeal or what have you. But last year's deficit was $2.8 trillion, obviously an abnormally high number under the disastrous American Rescue Plan. Do you think it's physically responsible to overspend by $1 trillion, even what they're projecting, even right now?
I mean, the deficit is large under current law, and that has important economic effects, right? That leads to higher interest rates and higher inflation, and that would, a wider deficit would make those challenges even greater.
During the State of the Union, the president said that to combat inflation, that businesses should just lower their costs, demonstrating, I think, a fiscal or economic illiteracy there. He's also accused them of price gouging. Businesses are just price gouging, and that's what's causing inflation. He and members of administration have said that. Do you think that do you hold the view that businesses are really kind of too dumb to understand that they should be trying every day to lower their costs, and they don't really do that? Or do you think that they don't understand that they compete by the lowest cost possible? Do you hold to that view that's been expressed by the president and some members of the administration?
So I would tell you our baseline projection assumes that businesses builds in the assumption that businesses are doing their best. They're trying to lower costs. They're trying to sell more and help their customers. And so we don't have price gouging in our baseline.
Thank you. I would think that you would, and I appreciate that answer on that. Do you think that can you confirm the overspending, does it contribute significantly to inflation in your view?
There I have to go back to what I said before, that it's a mix. It's together. It's the substantial demand, including from fiscal policy, together with the supply constraints.
Let me interject just for a second, because as you know, that the president's budget has proposed a massive increase over the next 10 years on spending. Admittedly, what is that going to do to inflation and prices going forward? And I'll just let you finish with that.
Okay, sure. Now I see the clock. I'll be quick. That we have inflation coming down in our forecast with fiscal, the fiscal constraint, with the actions of the Fed, and supply challenges waning. Deviations from that would feed into higher inflation. We haven't yet analyzed the president's budget. We will actually have that later in the summer. So stay tuned.
Well, we look forward to that analysis. But thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.